Brien, I am so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Oh, I am very glad to be here.
It's kind of been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing this for a while.
Yes. And finally, we kind of make this happen.
Yeah, your story is amazing, and we'll get into that in a minute. But you and I have kind of been working together for a long time. I think you actually met Laura Gill in my office, standing in line at an ICSC at the airport.
Yes.
And we've done some work for you and your real estate business over the years. It's been a long time, though.
Yes, and I remember meeting Laura. It was at the end of a shopping center meeting, the IS, meeting, and mentioning to her that one of the properties that we had in Egan was in need of the end cap. There was a large vacancy there, and we kind of brainstormed about it.
I think she ended up finding a tenant for you, didn't she?
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that ended up being a restaurant called Pardon My French.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. Boy, that was a long time ago.
It was. It was.
And it's been such a pleasure to work with you over the years, and you've been such a good supporter of our firm, and I just really want to thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely.
You've been wonderful.
This business is about really, making relationships happen. We all know a little bit from our own personal histories about how to do real estate, how to do it well, who we know, what we find out.
Yeah, and you're such a third-generation success story in the real estate business.
Yeah, it's been quite a storied history that really dates back, oh my gosh, to the car business days in the Midway on University Avenue. My grandfather, Harold Slawik, started as a young man, as a teenager, with a bicycle shop in the Midway area where his parents lived, and built up a successful kind of used car business, Slawik Motors.
Okay.
1940 was when formally when Slawik Motors was incorporated, and that's still kind of the namesake of the business now. We changed it to HarMar Inc. in the 50s. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and rumor has it that he coerced a young lady named Marie to come help him with the business.
Yes, and she had been working more or less kind of at a gas station as an accountant and bookkeeper in and around the Midway area, and
in the 1930s,
in
right?
the 1930s, yeah.
Which is kind of impressive, right?
Yep. And was able to kind of observe this Harold Slawik on the avenue with his activities in the car business, and then the two got together and eventually got married, and they were absolutely a powerful business couple together.
Wow, isn't that impressive?
Yeah.
And several entities, right? So there was the car business.
Mm-hmm.
Was there a bank?
There was Roseville State Bank. And then with the car business, my grandmother was kind of a mastermind of kind of vertical integration. So we had the car business, eventually Midway Ford. Prior to Midway Ford, it was Slawik, DeSoto, Plymouth. Not everybody could get financed. You had to, as a matter of fact, if you compare it today, financing back in those days wasn't as prevalent an option for customers. So they founded American Loan and Thrift.
Oh, interesting.
As a kind of a partner company to help
that makes sense.
those customers that came into the dealership that didn't have all of the cash to buy a car.
Interesting.
And
that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Smart.
And then down the road, we ended up, my grandmother knew that she had a lot of friends and customers out there that may not buy Ford cars, and she ended up founding Road King Leasing, which was really kind of a novelty in the time in the 60s. Automotive leasing and truck leasing wasn't as definitely it wasn't as common or even existed, certainly with the big manufacturers, and so that was a way for customers that may want a Mercedes or something else to lease an automobile that wasn't a Ford.
Wow. Wow, what a visionary.
Yeah, yeah.
And both of them were visionaries, right? Because then your grandfather went out and bought a golf course.
Right, it was Harkins Golf Course at County Road B and Snelling in Roseville. Roseville at that time in the early 60s, late 50s was this very emergent first-tier suburb, growing like gangbusters. And it was Ford Motor Company that really planted the seed in my grandparents' heads to begin the move even from the Midway out to these suburbs.
Really?
Where the growth of the population was taking place.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
And with that, hey, we're going to have to ultimately move the dealership out to Roseville. Let's take a look at other opportunities, namely real estate.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
And my grandfather was kind of captivated by seeing some of these climate-controlled shopping centers in the South. And, well, maybe we could do that up here. So the 40-acre site that used to be Harkins Golf Range ended up happening. They ended up buying that site.
And it was super controversial. You were kind enough to bring in a really neat scrapbook, and
Yes.
it was very controversial to build this mart
Yep.
in what is today Har-Mar Mall, right?
Right. And at the time, obviously, the residents in the Roseville area were very concerned about having a parking lot in their backyard. There were a number of homes next or around this area, it being Snelling. And yes, it was very controversial, although, over time it ended up getting smoothed out, and it happened, it transitioned, but it was not without controversy and conflict at the beginning. Certainly, it was that way.
Well, and you have pictures with the mayor and the governor flying over the site and kind of surveying that, and everybody was kind of weighing in.
Yes, Governor Elmer Anderson at the time was, these days, could you get the governor to come to a groundbreaking for a shopping center? Maybe not. But back then, all the city officials, the mayor of St. Paul, the mayor of Roseville, the governor, a lot of different other, certainly the whole Roseville City Council, a lot of different business leaders were all present for that groundbreaking, and that was May 15th, 1962.
Got it.
Yeah.
And so this development's under construction, and it's a big undertaking. It's a big project. It's expensive, and then tragedy happens.
Yes, unfortunately, so May 15th, 1962, the groundbreaking of Har-Mar happened. I was a mere child.
Do you remember it?
Just barely.
Okay.
I can remember the little helicopter flying around the site.
Of course.
So
Typical
I was,
boy.
I was so I was born in 1958, baby boomer. 4 years of age, and in July of 1960, my grandpa dies of a heart attack, leaving my
tragic.
grandmother with a huge responsibility in front of her. It was something like $3 to $6 million was committed. Not all of it on a loan, some of it cash and money contributed by some of the other divisions of the corporation at the time. And at that time, it was so much of a male-dominated culture. Her attorneys advised her, well, maybe you just might want to pack up your bags and sell the 40 acres of land and call it a day. And she said, well, I'll think about it for a week. And she came back and said, no, I'm going to do it. And
Gosh, I love
it
that.
proceeded, and she had the vision, the guts, the entrepreneurship skills to really fast forward it
And make it happen.
and make it happen in so many ways.
Yeah.
And to the benefit of the community. And I think that all the employees that were hired, and we brought this new vision of kind of like new urbanism to the suburbs. Instead of maybe people in Roseville having to go to downtown, we do like people to go downtown, but downtown would come to them. 50 stores under a roof.
50. There were 50 stores
Yeah.
when it opened. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I found fascinating that you shared with me is that the Ford Motor Company had a policy that when
Yes.
a spouse died,
Yeah.
when the husband died, when someone
Yeah.
became a widow, they were pretty much mandated to sell the dealership.
Right, right.
The wife was.
And so Grandma was not going to have any of that.
I wish I met her.
Yeah. So Ford came and said, "We're really sorry, Marie. You know, it's Ford policy that when you're widowed like this, that under our franchise arrangement, you're going to have to cough up the franchise. We'll sell it off, no problem." And he just goes, "You're not doing that. You got too many people to work for me. I've set this up. I've partnered with my husband all these decades. No way." They come back and they go, "Okay, we'll we'll make an exception. Maybe we'll just change the rule." So.
Well, and because she was wildly successful, she was selling 3,300 cars a week or something. I mean, some crazy number, right?
Yeah, per year it was an awesome. It was one of the largest Northwest Ford dealers in the country for quite a while. We even had a light truck service department that worked on all kinds of different models of Fords, and we took in other models as well over the years. This was in the Midway at Fairview University in the Midway, 1850 University. But she never missed a beat, my grandmother. And I just think of all, a lot of people would give up and kind of back away and wallow in their sorrow, and she did not do that. She just picked up the sticks and kept running, and it was very inspirational for me to learn that as I grew up. I think the impact of it has been more appreciated as I've gotten older, as I've sort of captured a lot of the history of the business over the years.
Interesting.
Yeah, she was very dynamic.
Well, and you got involved in the business pretty early with maybe a mop?
Yes. My brother Harold and I were janitors at the Ford dealership on Saturdays. Certainly if we wanted the privilege of being able to use a car, Dad said, "Okay, here's the arrangement. You're going to get up at 7 a.m. on Saturdays when you're not in school during the summer, and you're coming with me to the dealership." "Oh, what are we going to do?" "You're going to be cleaning up the service shop in the men's bathroom." Oh my God, that was quite baptism by fire.
Well, and so your dad must have been involved in the business. And I know he was involved in the real estate with you.
Yeah.
How did Marie integrate family members into the business?
With Dad, so Dad was president of Midway Ford. He managed and more or less operated the dealership. Grandma was the dealer of record. Later, he would take on some more ownership positions. Grandma was very fond of having family members kind of surround her in the business. My uncle, Ed Tishner, he's no longer affiliated with what's now Roseville Midway Ford, was involved, and he was, my dad's brother-in-law. He was married to my dad's sisters.
Okay.
Yeah. I was involved in the business, certainly under Dad, but then later on, Grandma saw to it that I could kind of sneak in through the back door with Road King Leasing, one of the other sister companies that, as I had mentioned earlier, did the multi-make and model leasing to customers that didn't buy a Ford. And
so that was your first
that
real
was my
involvement
first,
in the
yeah,
business.
right out of college.
Okay.
Yeah, for 10 years I worked at Road
Wow.
King. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Impressive.
it was, again, another one of those journeys of taking on different aspects. First, we had a car rental department at Road King, so I worked as the car rental manager, and then I became accounts payable and bookkeeping, and then accounts management and leasing and different aspects of the business over the years. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so what did you do after your tenure there? Literally 10 years there.
After that, I actually, with my first wife, moved to Arizona and opened what they call a Sears catalog store.
Really?
Down in an area called Green Valley, Arizona. And I did that for about 3 years.
What took you down there?
It was one of those things in the back of my history to take on kind of a new adventure, maybe see what it might be like to work outside of maybe the family business for a little while.
Super smart.
But Sears ended up abandoning the catalog business and bought out the catalog members, of which my first wife and I were members of that wonderful club. And then my dad called me. This was back in Dad had wrapped up my grandmother's estate. It took quite a while. My grandmother died in 1989, and it took probably 4 to 5 years to wrap up the estate, which included selling Har-Mar and Spruce Tree Center and some other various properties. And Dad said, well, we own this plot of land at County Road C in Snelling in Roseville, and we are looking to develop that. How would you like to come back and give it a try? Yes.
Yeah,
I'll
right?
try it.
I'll sign up.
Yeah, I'll sign up for that job.
Nice.
And it worked out wonderful because here I had the opportunity now to partner with my dad one-on-one. And that's where I've stayed, for the last 30, 35 years. And my dad passed away a couple years ago.
I'm
but
so sorry. Such a nice man.
In his memory and everything that he's taught me, it's really, really, really important that we've kept the business and hopefully made it flourish over the years. Yeah.
And, I had the privilege of seeing you and your father work together, and even just, the fact that it's a third generation, talk to me a little bit about what it's like to be successful. I mean, so many families dissolve or have huge issues over business, especially when they try to work together or discuss the different assets or whatever. You guys, it was kind of impressive to watch.
Yeah,
you work together.
The story, so very well in the real estate business. It's a story of, it isn't always success. It's also, there's some failures. I think sometimes you learn more in your failures than your successes. Dad and I had kind of a unique relationship in that he just allowed me the freedom to make many of the decisions, ultimately led to me becoming the president of the firm in about 1998. But he had mentored me along the way, and we worked together. Now, I was in an interesting position because a lot of the holdings that we had were in the Midway area along University Avenue. And University Avenue was the corridor between Minneapolis and St. Paul. Prior to 94 being built, that was the main thoroughfare, the main avenue between the two cities. So the University Avenue corridor was far different than it is now, was the main avenue for car dealerships.
Interesting.
It's completely different now. But likewise, with all of that, many businesses that were car dealers, had to own land around the dealership in order to house the inventory for the cars and the service shops. My grandparents did that and a little bit beyond. So they were fond of owning properties around the dealership, ultimately in the Midway. This is a long story, and I'm trying to make it shorter than
No, every bit of it's so fascinating. I love every detail.
The bottom line, when I circled up with Dad when he called me back in 1994. It was to sort of sell off some of these assets in the Midway. He did not like it, but we ended up doing things like 1031s with our property in Egan. And he was like, Egan? What's going on in Egan? What could possibly be happening there? I said, well, we need to diversify. We need to be in other areas of the city. And
So he wasn't a fan of selling.
he was not so much in the tradition in the family was to hold on to these assets a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So
And I
HarMar,
think
yeah,
generationally, that was kind of the MO
Yeah.
of most of the property in Minnesota at the time.
Yes.
Was owned by individuals versus now we've got a lot of outside owners, but
Yeah.
and typically they held the property for a long time.
yeah, and our accountant said one time, "Oh, so you own all these real estate assets in a C corp, which is about the worst type of corporation to own real estate. Double taxation." We did end up ultimately turning HarMar into an S corp, but you get trapped if you hold property and real estate for long periods of time, because by the time you've held them that long, they've depreciated down to almost nothing.
Sure.
All the depreciation eats away at that asset, except for the land. And lo and behold, what are our options? We'll sell it outright and pay a big tax bill, or do 1031 exchanges. And we did a number of those to kind of break up the monotony. And the Midway area, back to the Midway area, was going through a lot of change. And it was necessary for us to, if we were going to launch ourselves and stay relevant in the business, to sort of spread out. And that's what we did.
That's really smart.
Yeah.
That was really insightful.
Yeah.
What tips do you have for working with family members in business? I've heard a couple of jewels already that you've shared, especially, it really is amazing that your dad gave you so much rope and allowed you to, was there to mentor you, but allowed you to kind of make some decisions, make some good choices and make some mistakes.
Yes.
He listened to you.
And I think that families I think there's a natural tendency on the part of even a founder in a family business, let's have the family involved in the business, and not everyone in the family is cut out to be in the business. Mm-hmm. I think what I've learned is rely on third parties. Have a good attorney that represents you with all matters, the lease, the acquisition of the land. It's such a litigious endeavor to own real estate. Surround yourselves with good brokers, top in the field, architects, you name it, contractors, all those third-party elements. And I think my dad was a really good relier on reaching out to these experts and not only always insisting that he was always right. And I think that you have to sort of lower your ego, your self-centeredness, as much as entrepreneurs like to tout that they know everything. We certainly don't. And I think that if you're going to be successful in this business, you need to have the wisdom to look back and say, hey, I didn't do it all myself. I did it with the help of a lot of others, third parties,
I love that.
everything, Be grateful for what you have. And I'm always grateful every day that I can, open the doors to these businesses and move about. But I think it kind of becomes a fantasy on the part of a lot of families to think that everybody needs to be involved in the family business.
That's great advice.
Many of the family members, and there's nothing wrong with it, they simply don't have the skill set or the tolerance.
Or the desire.
For the risk or the desire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I didn't know that I would take a liking to it at the beginning. I thought, oh my gosh, this is not so pretty. This is pretty, these tenants are kind of weird.
Oh, funny. That's awesome.
They all have some strange story, you know.
Yeah.
Especially the mom and pop tenants,
Yeah.
which I just absolutely adore and love. But yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you have, such great role models in your grandparents and your dad and all of the experiences you've had, and now you're reaching out to others and offering some advice to folks. What kinds of things are you helping businesses, and what are you doing these days?
So prior to, unfortunately, COVID, my wife Monica and I launched a division of HarMar Inc. called Slawik Property Advisors, and the dream is still there, and we're warming it up more now that COVID is kind of a little bit in the rearview mirror, where we would act as advisors and consultants, mentors, maybe work with nonprofits to provide relevant real estate services, help with leases, help with site selection, the tenant side, the landlord side. And we've begun to do that in baby steps, but to me, my future, I feel, is not building up, jumping back and making investments in more real estate. It's teach others about what I've learned. Go back, grab the history that I've been through, and then lay it out and mentor and teach and advise. There's a lot to be learned from the mistakes you make. Like I said earlier, the size of loan that you're going to get, how high you're going to leverage the asset. Should you even proceed to lease a certain amount of space? How big? All those stories you're so well acquainted with too, Lisa, that how can we be a value-added element to a client with our history and advise? And I think that's, as I look forward on my vision about what I would like to do, I want to do and continue to do more of that. And continue to hold my broker's license here in Minnesota and kind of save people the inconvenience of making perhaps some mistakes that they don't see behind the curtain.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, your grandparents, especially Marie, were just such a force, right? So, talk to me a little bit about their legacy. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of, after hearing the story and seeing the scrapbook, and
Yes.
I think there needs to be a book and then a movie. So we need to figure this out, but just inspire us by some of those amazing, that amazing energy that they brought to this.
Yeah, and if we were to liken it to a TV series, I think it would be Falcon Crest.
Oh, funny. That's interesting.
With was it?
Sorry for you youngins who don't know what that is.
What was it? Jane Wyman was the actress, and she was this matriarch of a wine, just huge spread of a winery. I think it was in California, and she reminded me of my grandmother in a sense. Just like didn't take no for an answer. Ran the business. Yeah, my grandma was a formidable woman. I mean, she was only like 5'1".
Oh, really?
Red hair.
Oh, goodness.
Irish up and down and sideways in her demeanor. But, I mean, she was formal in the true sense of the word, and she was all business, and she could be quite stern. But, like I said earlier, having the history behind me and seeing all the tragedies and the energy that she had to prevail. She had cancer, breast cancer too, during some of these business ventures in her life. And, just the pure drive, ambition that she had. She grew up very poor and was orphaned at a very young age. Her mother died at age 38.
You're kidding.
Yeah, there were 3 kids. They lived in West St. Paul in a very, very, very small home. Her mother was a caterer. So it was one of those American stories where you can grow up and survive and be strong, and she was all of that. And so that was very inspirational. So I think I'm not sure if I answered the question accurately.
I'm so inspired, and I think you've been such a good steward of that legacy, and I think a lot of people could learn from you and your family as to how to transition from, those people with the vision to carry on their legacy in such a really respectful manner and take it to the next level and do so well with what they started with.
There's a lot to unpack here. The business went in so many different directions besides just the real estate. But the real love that I have is the real estate. And I think it was fortified with the other businesses because, real estate's got its own nuances and don't we know it's almost its own language in a sense. But some of the basic principles of real estate apply to many and all businesses. You've got a financial component, you've got the risk category. In a large sense, when you're a landlord, you're a partner to a business. You're an integral partner.
All of your tenants' businesses, right? Yeah, absolutely.
You do a lot of the financing for the tenant improvements. You cook that into the lease. And we've had some nice success stories over the years of partnering up and having really successful tenants, and it's kind of nice to piggyback along with them.
Yeah.
Along the avenue, along Snelling. Spruce Tree Center, I think the audience probably can't miss that site because it's this
so
big, tall green building. And the green was on purpose. My grandmother was Irish. She wanted to make a statement in the Midway. Snelling and University was one of the highest polluted avenues in the state of Minnesota.
Really?
So the city of St. Paul came to us or to our family and said, hey, we are going to lose highway funding from the federal government unless we get the pollution levels down in that corner. Can you help us? We'll assist you with a parking ramp if you build a building. And lo and behold, it happened. There was industrial revenue bonds issued. It happened. Unfortunately, it went up when a huge, great real estate recession began in the late 80s, 86, 87.
Sure. Really?
Unfortunately, when my grandmother died in 89, the building wasn't even half occupied.
Really?
So we had to make a really difficult decision to sell HarMar Mall and Spruce Street. One had a giant tax gain, one had a giant tax loss. We coupled them together and
offset.
Skated off.
Yeah, wow, that's fascinating too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we began, Dad and I began the great reshuffle, resetting of the real estate portfolio in the Midway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, that is just fascinating. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I think we could talk for hours here.
We could.
This is so fascinating. Yeah. I am so inspired by your story. I knew bits and pieces of the history of Har-Mar, but nothing like this. In fact, if it's okay with you, can we put a couple of notes on just of some of the amazing accomplishments of your family, and
we can certainly update those notes. I kind of didn't update it most recently, but absolutely. I think it's inspirational too for women out there that are in the industry, in the real estate industry, or whatever the business may be. Is don't ever give up. Carry on, take a risk. There's a lot of opportunity out there.
Well, I would like to be the first to order the book.
Yeah.
And I'm serious. I can't get enough of this, and I really appreciate your taking the time and sharing the story. It's really It's a super personal story, and I
Yeah.
just really appreciate you sharing that with us. I'm super
Absolutely,
inspired.
I'm really happy to tell it, and I hope it's a little bit inspirational, but I feel good about it.
I think everyone listening is going to just love it. Thank you so much, Brien.
Thanks a lot, Lisa.